Hi, I'm Dong. Welcome to Digging into China, where we explore China in depth to reveal unique perspectives. If we borrow from the history of the French Revolution, we can gain a deeper understanding of the several stages along China's revolutionary path and the unfinished business that still lingers. The 1911 Xinhai Revolution was like pushing China's Louis XVI onto the guillotine, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. The founding of the People's Republic by the CCP in 1949 was like the Jacobins taking power, establishing a new regime in the name of radical revolution. And the Xi Jinping era since 2012 has echoed Napoleon's restoration, along with the personal dictatorship and the resurgence of imperial tendencies that followed the revolution. In this comparison, we see that China's revolution hasn't ended. It's been repeatedly postponed, countered, and misinterpreted. Just as Napoleon's rise both ended France's republican experiment and restored a dictatorial order in a new form, Xi's consolidation of power signals that China's Great Revolution, aimed at building a modern republic, hasn't truly been completed. It's simply entered a new historical phase. We often habitually think of revolution as a burst of explosive events, an instantaneous break in the flow of history, a landmark moment in time, a change of regime, a storm in the streets. But truly profound revolutions, especially those that transform an entire nation's civilizational structure, are never finished in days or even years. They must be measured in centuries. The French Revolution was like that, and so is China's Great Revolution. They are not events with a neat completion, but ongoing historical process full of reversals and struggles. If we view China's modernization over the past century or more as a prolonged Great Chinese Revolution, much like the French Revolution, we'll see it as a massive historical shift in civilizational form, from autocracy to republic, from subjects to citizens, and this revolution remains unfinished to this day. Over 100 years, the Chinese people have gone through the fierce upheaval of overthrowing the emperor, yet they've not arrived at a true republic. They've experienced the material modernization, but they still linger in the old logic of spirit and politics. The fall of the Qing dynasty was far from the true beginning of a republic. The Republic of China's departure didn't mean the arrival of democracy. The power structures of autocracy haven't undergone fundamental change. All the turbulence and the passion of these 100+ years have been merely the prelude to the greatest revolution. The 1911 Xinhai Revolution overthrew Manchu colonial rule, restored China's legitimate sovereign status, and marked the end of the monarchical autocracy that had lasted over 2,000 years. But while the Xinhai Revolution broke down the old system, it failed to establish a stable new one. It kicked off a century-long cycle of revolution and restoration in modern China, a revolution left unfinished. The first republic in Asia, established in 1912, ultimately couldn't solidly realize the ideals of democracy and republicanism. The chaos of the Beijing warlord era left China still struggling in the mud, political darkness, hardships for the people. In the 1920s and beyond, the forces of the nationalists and the communists rose one after another, trying to carry on and complete unfinished mission of the Xinhai pioneers. Yet in this process, history showed its paradoxes. Every attempt at revolution was overtaken by a new autocratic order before it could finish. So the goals of revolution were frustrated and forced into another cycle. The Mao Zedong era, which took the stage after 1949, marked a crucial phase where China's revolution shifted from idealism to fanatical extremes, what we might call China's Jacobin moment. Just as Robespierre and others in the French Revolution fused virtue and terror into one, Mao developed the Marxist-Leninist dogma into a kind of a secular religion of revolutionary ideology. In the Mao era, class struggle was promoted as something that worked like magic at a touch, elevated to a national faith. In this ideological system, class struggle was absolutized and moralized into the ultimate standard for judging right and wrong. As a result, revolution was no longer just a means for political change, it became an end in itself, even a never-ending carnival of the masses and a collective creed. The CCP shaped the so-called new person through constant mass mobilization, thought reform, self-criticisms, and struggle sessions, creating an atmosphere of revolutionary faith community. This political fervor carried clear religious overtones. Mass rallies became like sermons, fighting selfishness and criticizing revisionism like collective confessions. Political scrutiny like an inquisition. In secular form, it satisfied the public need for faith and moral order, while stripping away individual will and rational judgment. Just as Jacobins in the French Revolution set up the Committee of Public Virtue to scrutinize citizens' morals, Mao's China built an omnipresent system of political pressure and moral trials. People recited Chairman Mao's quotation every day, with morning reports and evening debriefs. Neighbors and colleagues spied on and denounced each other. From kindergarten kids to high government officials, everyone was steeped in the feverish atmosphere built by revolutionary theology. One of the deepest impacts of Maoist authoritarianism on Chinese society was shaping the masses into submissive subjects. Under the era's relentless pressure and brainwashing, the people were gradually tamed into objects of the revolution, passive objects of obedience rather than active citizens participating in public affairs. The long-term struggle and the terror taught people survival comes first. Obedience above all, voicing differing opinions openly could bring deadly disaster, and any hint of rebellious spirit could get you labeled as an outsider and purged. Over time, most chose to keep their heads down and stay silent, cultivating habits of resignation, deference to superiors. This mirrored the psychological scars the Jacobin terror left on French society. French people learned the silence and the submission during the terror, only gradually regaining reasons after the Thermidorian reaction toppled Robespierre. In China, because of the Mao era's extreme isolation and information control, this culture of submissiveness took even deeper root. Obedience became a virtue, doubt an original sin. People grew used to waiting for top directives, unaccustomed to independent thinking or questioning authority. Revolution's original intent was to liberate humanity, but in its extremified form, it instead strangled human agency. The Maoist legacy caused a generational break in civic spirit. The generation that grew up in Mao's era struggled to possess the rights consciousness and independent personality that modern citizens should have. Even after the reforms and opening up, many Chinese in politics still hold a subject mentality, fawning over those above, worshipping power, indifferent to public affairs. We could say Maoist authoritarianism trained hundreds of millions into docile subjects, stripping them of the ability to stand as modern citizens. Autocracy's greatest sin isn't just trampling human dignity, it's robbing people of the capacity to reclaim it, leading them to self-debasement, adrift under tyranny. All this is a massive drag on China's future democratization. It's a lesson the unfinished Great Revolution must still make up for. After Mao's death and the end of the Cultural Revolution, China reached a historical turning point. Deng Xiaoping, who came to power in 1978, used his pragmatic approach to correct the Mao era's extreme mistakes, steering the country from chaos toward stability. He proposed focusing on economic construction with his black cat, white cat theory and such, not arguing over ideology but channeling energy into developing productive forces. This marked a major shift from revolutionary idealism to pragmatism. The core of Deng's philosophy was stability above all, much like Napoleon's principles of prioritizing order in the later stages of the French Revolution. After years of internal strife, Napoleon took power in France, declaring the revolution over and that France needed order. He used an iron fist to quell chaos and focus on restoring social stability. Similarly, after taking control in China, Deng put the stability in the overriding position. He repeatedly stressed that for China, the overriding need was stability. Without a stable environment, nothing could be accomplished. This demand for order stemmed from reflection on the 10 years of Cultural Revolution turmoil, and it was also spurred by the Soviet collapse. Deng believed that only an authoritative government and a centralized leadership could prevent another plunge into full civil war and national disintegration. So internally, he rehabilitated the wrongly accused, set things right to restore public trust. Externally, he opened the country, bringing in funds and technology to revive the economy. In the end, Deng's strategy did bring relative stability and prosperity to Chinese society by the close of the 20th century, but at the cost of suppressing revolutionary idealism and political participation enthusiasm, temporarily shelving the pursuit of democracy and freedom. A value system began to dominate society, one that substituted economic growth for revolutionary ideals. In the Deng era and the subsequent rule of Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, China gradually formed a unique red oligarchic capitalism, some call it crony capitalism, that blended market economy with authoritarian politics. It differed from the full planned system of Soviet-style socialism and from Western liberal democratic capitalism. The key point of this structure was the party holding onto power without letting go, while using markets and capital to bolster ruling resources. In the transition from planned to market economy, CCP high cadres children and power brokers got rich first, monopolizing prime resources and opportunities. State-owned enterprises through privatization or shareholding reforms flowed into the hands of the elite, while emerging private firms needed official backing to grow big. As a result, power and capital formed an intimate alliance, creating a vast vested interest group. This was a bit like the new nobility in Napoleon's time. The revolution smashed the old autocracy, but new elites rose on military merits and the emperor's favor. In China, the fusion of official and business was especially pronounced. Power organs and big capital groups intertwined, with political elites gaining fortunes through rent-seeking and economic elites securing monopolies by clinging to power. Overnight, official profiteering, backdoor deals, and power money trades became commonplace. Ordinary folks called it fake capitalism under crony collusion. The direct fallout of this hybrid system was widening wealth gaps and rampant corruption. The reforms and opening improved people's lives, but they also created massive corruption opportunities for officials at every level. With the fruits of people's labor seized and divided by officials and a tiny elite of vested interests. From this, China formed a ruling steady state. Politically, high centralization; economically, using market means to accumulate wealth, letting the elite enjoy both autocratic power and capitalist profits. This model ran stably for years, seeming to find the trick of substituting economic legitimacy for revolutionary legitimacy. But it also planted new risks. When the people see severe injustice behind the prosperity, a lack of fairness and justice, the moral foundation of rule erodes away. This legitimacy sustained by growth, once the growth slows or stalls, faces a severe crisis of trust. Another striking feature of the Deng era was the cooling and the pseudo-secularization of official ideology. In Mao's time, banners of communism and a class struggle flew high. The masses were demanded to hold religious-like faith in Marxism-Leninism. After Deng, the ruling party gradually downplayed utopian slogans, proclaiming instead that development is the hard truth. From faith in Mao to faith in GDP, revolutionary fervor was replaced by consumerism and patriotism. What people chattered about was no longer socialist grand ideals, but stock indices, housing prices, wealth ranking. In government propaganda, happiness equaled material wealth. Patriotism equaled supporting economic construction. GDP growth became the new political religion, enshrined yearly in concrete numbers in government work reports. In this atmosphere, ordinary folks were guided into bury their heads in money-making, chasing personal material comfort, tossing political participation and power demands to the back burner. This, of course, was just what the rulers wanted, making the people forget freedom, forget democracy and human rights. Just remember making money and getting rich, and the rule stays steady. This is a Napoleonic order legitimacy, prosperity for you, but no talk of freedom. For a long time, many tacitly accepted this deal: stability for development, freedom for modest prosperity. But as social problems bubbled up beneath the material boom, like corruption, environmental destruction, gaping wealth gaps, moral decline, and as deeper crisis of political stagnation brewed, the economic miracle masked a rigid system with no rule of law, no checks on power. Its accumulated ills grew ever clearer after entering the 21st century. With diminishing growth dividends, this undemocratic modernization model has reached a crossroads. Without the political reform, even its economic achievements can't last. Social contradictions and a crisis will inevitably erupt. In the Deng Xiaoping and his successors' era, China established a ruling pattern akin to Napoleonic order, quelling revolutionary turmoil, prioritizing stable order, relying on economic development as the source of legitimacy. This phase avoided the Mao era's fanaticism and disorder, but it also froze democratic transition. Napoleon once called himself the ender of the Great Revolution. He ended France's guillotine age, but built personal empire. Likewise, Deng ended the Cultural Revolution's extremes, but his successors didn't achieve true republican democracy either. They just grafted the market economy onto the authoritarian framework. This transitional order was, compared to revolutionary terror, undoubtedly progress, and it brought real benefits to the people for a time. But it wasn't the revolution's end point. Instead, it was more like an intermission where the revolution was put on hold. China's Great Revolution remains unfinished. The real tests and the turning points lie ahead. Xi Jinping, who rose after the CCP's 18th Congress in 2012, marked a dramatic reversal in Chinese politics, a Napoleonic-style restoration, whose main features were the clawback of power and personal centralization. Under the collective leadership and the term limits framework Deng had laid down, top power in China had become somewhat institutionalized and relatively collective during Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao's times. But soon after taking power, Xi showed a strong tendency to accumulate authority. Through high-pressure anti-corruption campaigns, he purged rivals and dissenters, vastly strengthening his control over party, government, and military spheres. In 2018, through constitutional amendments, he abolished the two-term limit for state chairmen, ending Deng's political legacy of scrapping lifelong tenure for leaders, paving the way for his own indefinite re-elections, even lifelong rule. Just like Napoleon crowning himself emperor and self-appointing lifelong rule, China returned once more to personal dictatorship. At the same time, personal cult and ideological resurgence became obvious. Media blared about the Xi core and the people's leader. Xi's portraits and quotations appeared on walls everywhere. His works became required reading for party caterers, even seeping into elementary textbooks. Official discourse shifted from prior technocratic style to a new round of ideological mobilization, putting Xi thought into the party constitution. The old, crossing the river by feeling the stones, pragmatism gave way to the red faith of the new era, stressing never forget the original aspiration, remember the mission, reviving the grand communist ideals. This whole approach had the flavor of returning to the Mao years, mockingly called a harbinger of a new cultural revolution. Of course, the reality differs from the Mao era, but the tendencies of mythologizing the state and re-deifying the leader can be ignored. The state is again portrayed as a sacred and inviolable, party loyalty above all. The leader is reshaped as an omniscient helmsman, with personal will steering the nation's course. To understand the politics of the Xi era at its core, look at the psychological structure of totalitarian rule. This can be summed up as patriarchal authority plus fear, order plus moral orthodoxy. Xi himself likes to position as the people's parental official, the family head, promoting party insiders and outsiders, see superiors and subordinates as one family. The whole society's political discourse takes on thick patriarchal and father worship tones. The party as parents, Xi as helmsmen, the people as children. This psychological mode caters to Chinese traditions longing for sage kings and enlightened rulers, and it helps mold a submissive social psyche. Second, Xi's rule creates a pervasive order of fear through forceful stability maintenance and high-tech surveillance. The anti-corruption drive is everywhere, leaving officials in constant dread. Harsh laws and penalties, speech controls, ordinary people turn pale at the political talk. Fear becomes the lubricant for social operation. People don't dare speak or act out, self-policing within the red lines the authorities draw. Third, in propaganda, the regime pushes a set of moral orthodoxy, the great mission of national rejuvenation, socialist core values, anti-corruption and thrift advocacy, and so on. This burdens many with a sense of moral duty and identification, as if following the party is patriotism, is moral, defying the party is immoral, unpatriotic. The essence of totalitarian politics isn't just institutional design, it's a psychological control, making the masses accustomed to being ruled, even internalizing in their thoughts the rightness of being ruled. Back then, Napoleon used religion and honorific medals to win hearts, making the French psychologically accept imperial restoration. Today, the Xi regime uses nationalism and traditionalism to rally values, combined with omnipresent surveillance and discipline, turning compliance into subconscious habit. When a society's majority self-censors and self-restrains psychologically, daring only to move in safe zones, then centralized rule gains mass foundation. That's the success of Xi-era governance, the remaking of social obedience. Compared to the Mao era's external coercive pressure, now more people unconsciously cooperate, stay silent, and follow, either swept up in official narratives or deeply cowed by fear, neither willing nor daring to break the rules. It's worth noting that Xi's dictatorship isn't a simple replay of the Mao era. It's built on new technological and social conditions, a new authoritarianism for the digital age. In the past, signs of authoritarian rule were often massive personal cults like Mao or Stalin's, with frequent political campaigns and open violence. Now, China's totalitarianism has grown more refined and concealed. It uses big data, AI, cameras, and social media for all-around societal monitoring and guidance. Cyberspace through the Great Firewall, keyword filters, and mass post deletions shields unfavorable into form public view. Meanwhile, officials use water armies and algorithms to steer and manipulate opinion, creating bubbles of fake public sentiment. In this setup, autocracy becomes more efficient, more invisible. No need for daily mass struggles. Everyone lives under the gaze of cameras and data non-stop. No need for leaders to lecture daily. Algorithms precisely feed you the positive energy content you need. This system is more stable than the Mao era's reliance on personal will and mass movements because it seeps into every corner of daily life, often without crude force, leaving people controlled without realizing it. Under digital totalitarianism, many don't even notice their lost freedoms because in the slow boil of the frog, fear and compliance have internalized as part of life. We could say China's digital Napoleon has arrived. Xi, using 21st century tech, has partly realized what Napoleon couldn't, building a highly centralized empire that self-brands as modern and prosperous. Of course, history tells us that every such restoration carries the seeds of the next revolutionary outburst. Just like after Napoleon's empire, France surged again toward the republican movements. China's revolutionary path shares vital ties with the French Revolution. So will China, like France, ultimately head toward the republic, democracy, freedom? If it reaches that point, what prerequisites are needed, and in what form will this social change unfold? I'll pick up this topic in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you find this video helpful, please like it, drop a comment below, and hit the subscribe button right here. It really helps YouTube suggest my video to others. I'll be back with more content soon. Until then, be well.